Hi, I'm Kangaroo, and I'll be reviewing Wonder Woman 84 for today. There's a little bit of context that I want to give prior to doing this review. Uh, when the original Wonder Woman came out and it was reviewed extremely well by both audiences and critics, I managed to actually get my mom to come out to the theater to watch the movie with me, and wherein we both ended up hating it. It was I think we hated it for different reasons. I never particularly got into why mom didn't like it, but that's her business. Everyone's opinion is their own, and I'm not really. I don't really have too many in-depth talks with her about various pieces of cinema. I think I go to the movies about 10 times as much as her. Regardless, as a joke for Christmas this year, I bought my mom a copy of Wonder Woman 84, and she decided that we should both watch it. Now, I had an idea of what the plot was going in. I'd seen other reviews of it. I'd seen just the original advertisements. I had an idea of who Cheetah was. I saw the Maxwell Lord concept, and I'm pretty sure I've seen a few various parody videos and things of that kind of spoil what was going in. As well as just reading reviews and seeing aggregate scores. And I understood that Wonder Woman 84 was reviewed technically worse than the original Wonder Woman, but my original score of Wonder Woman, and I believe I posted that onto my Instagram page around a 4 out of 10, was still lower than the average score for it. So I was actually kind of optimistic and hoping that it would be better than my expectations, but not that great as a movie still. So I kind of went into it with mild optimism, but still kind of an aura of negativity from the first movie. I'm pretty sure my mom just went into it with pure negativity, not wanting to watch it in the first place. Actually, didn't ask her to watch it, but she figured if I bought the DVD, I might as well play it once, and we can both sit down and have an absolute laugh at whatever occurs on screen. So that brings us to why I'm reviewing it right now, and just probably a little bit of help into figuring out why my score may be what it ends up being. Um, so we'll just start. The premise, it's... Oh, shit. 1 moment. I always hit the wrong key there. The premise is not great, honestly. It's... The entire premise of the movie is that Wonder Woman, who has stayed in the world of man for approximately 60 years since World War II, still misses Steve Trevor and has not found a relationship even remotely close to that, which kind of shocks me as astounding because that implies that she went through like World War II, and there's at least like 4 or 5 wars she went through, especially if she didn't stick to just America. Like, Superman is an American icon, but Wonder Woman she can be rather global. So the number of conflicts that she could have went through, or the number of interesting men she could have talked to and interacted with in a span of 60 years is just astronomical. And the fact that she still is hung up on Steve Trevor, like a guy that she met for a grand total of, I want to say, 2 weeks back in the 1910s, is really odd to me. It's a hard sell to be like, hey, she gets Steve back somehow. And alright, so that's a bit of a hard sell. Trying to sell Wonder Woman in 1984 doesn't particularly do much for me, since I don't need to look at the 80s and see Wonder Woman doing stuff in that. And it actually made me curious as to how it was going to go about, because I remember that this is still tying into the overall canon of the Justice League at large, and therefore they need to explain how Wonder Woman wasn't particularly a fan of the world of men, but just lived there for at least 80, 100 years ish before Batman v Superman. I don't know about you, but if you can go anywhere you like and you live in a place that you don't want to deal with for 100 years, you might just have some problems. So it's not a good selling premise, and it would be tougher to fit her character into what it needs to be by the end in order to have her properly gel with her character in Batman v Superman. So honestly, that's kind of one of the first things that always gets me. It's very nonsensical. Hold on one moment. Let me just realize I made a small mistake there. So it's not great. It's not a particularly good sell. It's a difficult one if you were trying to sell it blindly. But premise doesn't actually mean much. A very bad premise can still lead to a very good movie overall. It's just I always try to say like how difficult it is to really sell it to someone on the outside. The beginning is uh, it's actually pretty good. I honestly will say it begins with kind of a montage of the 80s and kind of features a few cameos from characters who are going to appear later on, and Wonder Woman stopping a crime and stopping multiple crimes, honestly, and doing it in kind of an outlandish, campy manner, and it's good. It's setting the tone for what the whole movie's gonna be like, and it's really trying to establish that we're not trying to stick to like the gritty realism. We want to make things colorful and funky and groovy and happy and a little over the top, if not a lot over the top. You know, there's a lot of flash, not the greatest amount of function in it, but it's still it sets a good tone, and you see where things are going, and you're like, okay, I'm catching the vibes, I'm getting it, it's going fine. uh I I will say it first. This is gonna be my first movie review, so I am personally not a good judge of acting. I have I've I've seen people perform hammed up lines of dialogue and been like, "Yep, that makes sense." And I've seen people give those Oscar-worthy performances and been like, "Is something off here?" But I still do like to include it in my reviews. Maybe as a hope that I can get better at it, or just talking to someone else about how good acting is. But I, this is one of those scripts where not only does it feel like the writer screwed over the actors then took it and screwed over themselves. Like there's bits of dialogue that are picked for the plot that they have to be said a specific way, and it doesn't come off as convincing. It sounds like they're really picking their words specifically so that the plot can go in a proper direction. And there's no other reason a person would say it like that. And kind of instead of taking these lines and hamming them up, chewing the scenery, taking it all in, a lot of acting is saying it straight faced. Is done like I'm supposed to believe these characters would come to this conclusion as the very first thing that they should. Like the moment where you meet Steve Trevor, instead of being like, "Oh my gosh, Diana, it's me, Steve Trevor," which would be, the typical introduction for people who've been gone for 60 years. Instead, it's not even like a "Hi, do you remember me?" or a "Hey, oh my gosh, it's good to see you." It's he quotes some quote that he has from the old movie that just doesn't make any sense. It comes off as like if there were a list of introductions you could pick, he picked the 20th best option. And you realize they're only saying it like that because it's supposed to inspire some sense of nostalgia from the first movie, as opposed to just having a human conversation. And there's parts like this in the movie all the goddamn time. There's pieces where Maxwell Lord is offering things to people who are making wishes, and just he's immediately after accepting the wish, he's painting some immaculate drawback to their wish and absconding away with it, as if he would not be immediately shot on the spot in some of these situations. There's there's pieces where they try to make like a philosophical uh, just philosophical note or philosophical rambling on about the power of truth and how magic works and who the gods are and everything, and how so much is important, and how it's like, and how everything needs to be taken with this sense of gravity, and God, none of it works. It's like the line itself is written bad, and then the people don't do anything in the movie to rectify it or make it sound fantastic or make it sound like they're convincing you. It's something that really irks me. It's honestly, yeah, fuck it. It's a red. There's there might be some worse acting somewhere. I don't think I've ran into it. Which actually does remind me. I forgot the actual beginning of the movie, which outside of the 84 vibes, there was the beginning in which it goes back to Diana's childhood and shows a section where she essentially cheats in order to win a competition, but the competition she was already winning unrealistically even when she wasn't cheating, and it was portrayed incredibly odd, and they're like, you need to understand that you can't just take something by cheating. But I'm wondering how she really cheated. If she, like, she didn't hit the markers, sure, but she still got on the horse and, like, did everything else. As far as the other people know, what are the chances that Diana just missed the arrow or whatnot? I don't know. Let me. I need to change that one back around, because that beginning, that part of the beginning was not particularly great. The 80s part actually was. The music and sound effects was, huh. Now that I'm thinking of it, I can't name too many soundtracks that came across. The score was okay. It wasn't like, there's a few montages. There's plenty of action scenes in which the sound effects get some decent dues, but nothing comes out as super memorable. They do play with Wonder Woman's theme a few times, and even Cheetah has her own theme with these pretty intimidating style blaring horns, and those are nice, but they seem to be dropped in at particularly weird times. It's not as graceful as it'd like. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of unmemorable in that concept. Yeah, I think to be honest with me, like, a lot of music does have to stand out in order to get a green or a blue for me in that category, and just it doesn't for this one. Like, the licensed tracks aren't. Actually, I don't think there are too many licensed tracks in there, and then the original tracks that go with it are they're fitting. They're okay. It's not particularly bad. Actually, I will upgrade this to a green. It's okay. It's fine. It does its job, but nothing ever comes great out of that. Actually, no, I'm gonna turn that audio back down, because the other thing I'm realizing is there's a few moments in dialogue where it really does not properly hit the mark. It there's a few just heavily inaudible scenes, or people will be talking over one another while some audio is going on in the background, such as a tornado or a lightning strike or inclement weather, and it's not good. Um, Visuals. There's a thing, and this might come from someone who plays a ton of video games, but you can, one, notice bad CGI, and you kind of notice bad camera angles a little bit more. I feel like if you play video games a lot, because there's been CGI that I've looked at and been absolutely disgusted by, while others have been decently pleased with it. So I feel like I can be a little bit harsh when it comes to those. But there's so many moments that try to stress the fact that Wonder Woman and a variety of compatriots and other people have super speed, and this fails 90% of the time. She's running, and it just looks like she's running. There's no way that she's breaking. I don't know what the max speed is, but they're they're not exhibiting any superhuman feats of speed, but they're trying to make you think they are. That Wonder Woman can just rush across a field and it looks super cool, but it's like, but it doesn't. It has never looked cool, and there's a variety of other elements in the story where even if you're saying, yeah, it's supposed to be camp, or it's supposed to be cheesy, it's supposed to be over the top, it's supposed to be unrealistic, it still doesn't work in the context of being unrealistic. Which it comes off as just not particularly fantastic. On top of that, there's a few times where they finally, if you've seen the cover art for various pieces of Wonder Woman, there's the part where she's wearing the gold armor and she's really showing off the use of it and all the details, and how it's, and how the metal is breaking and bending and how she's flying over everything, and it looks like kind of cheap, shiny CGI. It doesn't particularly fit the character that much, and it's a kind of a thematic departure from previous scenes where Wonder Woman is running around in kind of the old classic red and blue armor, which that also doesn't look particularly great. I think it's kind of ironic, but they've shown like the new Wonder Woman style, and they have an older style in which she's in a much skimpier dress, and I think for live action it would be better if she has the new unskimpy style, like the one that has like the full blue leggings and the actual full jacket and shirt that covers everything up. Like it seems a little bit more sensible for a human to wear, and actually it still fits within the 80s of being a super colorful wardrobe because it's all blues and reds and golds and everything. The Wonder Bikini thing that they have aesthetic doesn't particularly work, and it kind of, I don't think it's CGI. I'm pretty sure she's wearing something like that when they were filming, but the effects that they do in order to make it properly shine more or make it more vibrant, it fails a little bit harder because, I mean, back in the first Wonder Woman, this costume was contrasted against the drabness of World War One, whereas in this, the costume is trying to compete with the 80s and you understand there's a different level of color there, and so they're trying to mix these things up, and it doesn't do well. Other than that, I'm trying to think of other visuals that may have been in the movie, any particular feats or crazy action scenes or whatnot, and most of the other stuff just kind of ends up rather campy and just overall mixed, and just general things that I don't have much to particularly say about in the good or bad direction. In terms of tension, this is one of the ones that I probably is a little tough for me to rate because I knew the events that were going to happen in the movie before going into it. But in terms of how much tension they create, it kind of succeeds at it, but at the same time it fails. Because once you understand the rules of what exactly they're fighting for, it's an all or nothing bet, and you realize, okay, cool. If it's all or nothing, it's gonna be all. Like that's it. There's kind of that point. It's almost like the uncanny valley, but opposite, where if something is betting everything, you understand you're going to win, but if it's betting close to everything, there's still a chance that you could lose, and you have to work with absolute scraps. But so much gets thrown onto the line, gets thrown into the gamble of the will it or won't it pay off controversy, that it ends up being middling. It's not bad. They're trying their hardest to raise the stakes, and I'm glad there actually are stakes. It just doesn't go anywhere because you're looking at it and you're saying, oh, okay, cool, this is a threat because it's like the wish takes something with it, so there's a duplicitous act in all the wishes that are going around, and it can really bounce back. And then like within, I want to say around 2/3 in the movie, things start escalating to nuclear war tensions, and you're just like, oh, okay, so this is clearly has to stop. and this has gotten way out of control. This has gone overboard, and there's no way in hell this doesn't just undo everything. Like, there's no way in hell the resolution to this movie isn't just, and then everything was okay. So it burns out its own tension by making the stakes so high. As far as the pace, I would actually say the pace is pretty good. The movie moves from one scene to the next with kind of a bit of a flourish. It keeps on making sure there's things happening and that you're staying engaged, and it's trying its hardest to make you stay engaged. Whether it does that coherently is a that's another thing to be debated, but it genuinely moves from scene to scene. There wasn't any time where it felt particularly languishing or whatnot, so it's actually got a pretty good pace to it. There's The movie is about, I think it's 2.5 hours overall, a little bit more than that, and it didn't feel. There was one moment where I was genuinely like, man, I'm surprised this movie is still going, but that was more due to the overall length and not particularly because of any particular scene that felt oddly slow or that it wasn't going anywhere. Like, every scene kind of does have a point to it, but it just doesn't all add up properly, which is kind of the next problem. One of the elements about Wonder Woman 84 is that it needs to tie into both the previous Wonder Woman movie and also Batman v Superman. Batman v Superman happening after it means that Wonder Woman's power scale hits a rooftop with that movie, and therefore it's supposed to be like, oh, she doesn't go anywhere beyond that in Wonder Woman 84, because if she did, that'd be fucking stupid. So anyway, she like breaks that power ceiling and like ascends beyond that multiple times, grabs some cool armor, learns to fucking lasso wrangle lightning. She flies, she turns a plane invisible, and it's just like, where the absolute hell was all of this shit in Batman v Superman? It kind of forgot that it needs to pay attention to not only its own lore but stuff outside of it. In addition to that, the consistency inside the own movie is bad because most of the crux of the plot is around Maxwell Lord granting wishes and taking stuff along with it, and everything having these negative drawbacks. But how the drawbacks work and when they work or why they work is just absolutely all over the place. Sometimes it seems like it happens instantaneously, and sometimes it seems like it takes days for things to properly kick in, where some happen within an absolute second, and it doesn't seem like the wishes generate people or generate items out of thin air most of the time. But you have to ask, like, okay, if this person appeared within 3 seconds of you making the wish, were they already like coming into the office 10 minutes ago, or were they driving to the scene from like an hour ago? It doesn't particularly answer these questions. There's a lot of things that come out of nowhere that aren't well explained, and then there's just a variety of rules that the world is trying to make, both around the wishes, around Wonder Woman's power, around what the concept of the truth is, around Steve Trevor's situation where like he's body snatching. Everything just pretty much plays by the rules of it works how we want it to work in this particular scene, and don't try to move it on anywhere else. In the same boat, intellect. I don't think I've ever seen characters act so stupidly. Like I said before, when it came to the acting, part of it is I think the writers fucked the movie over, but there's parts where you're just looking at characters and how they're acting and how they're behaving, and you're just thinking there has to be like a simpler way to go about this. And if you're applying like 5 minutes of thought to it, the answer is yeah, they probably could. Like realizing you could probably end most of the problem by just putting a bullet in Maxwell Lord's head, or going up to him and saying, I wish everyone else rescinded their wishes. Or or making a wish that properly trumps other people's wishes, or people not interacting with Maxwell Lord because the guy looks like he's gone insane. There's so many times where things don't work and they just, or things aren't supposed to work and they do just because the scene needs them to. Like Diana hijacking a plane and Steve Trevor, who hasn't flown a plane for 60 years, somehow understanding the flight controls of it. Or Wonder Woman being capable of flight because she heard a mild rumination on it from Steve earlier in the movie, and it just. God, there's so. Barbara's character wishing to become an apex predator, which doesn't mean anything because she's a human. Humans are an apex predator. That, if you wanted to become the ultimate apex predator, the human version of that is like Jason Voorhees, not a fucking cheetah. I don't even think cheetahs are the are the most dominant predator in the field of cats. Just there's no reason that she'd become a cheetah of all things, and there's no reason that she should wish to be an apex predator. Why would she not just wish for something like, I wish I could protect Maxwell Lord, or I wish I could beat Wonder Woman in a fight? Who the fuck would wish to be an apex predator of all things? Makes no goddamn sense, except to create tension in this loose ass plot. Like, fucking hell. I'm not sure if I watched the same movie as the one in the trailer, but I could have swore there were a few jokes that were done in the trailers that I didn't end up seeing in the movie. It wasn't. It may have been something I missed because of the dialogue kind of being a little garbled when I was watching it. But the humor is there's attempts at humor. It lands 50-50. I think a lot of the time the humor that they're going for isn't primarily in setups and punchlines. It's more in the wackiness of it all. Just kind of I think that's part of the point of why it was set in 1984, just to be like, ho ho man, look at the 80s, they're kind of fun. Look at Maxwell Lord, isn't he an eccentric oil tycoon? Which, okay, it's like, look at Steve Trevor trying on new fashion. Look at this guy from World War One being amazed that we went to the moon. Look at this reference that we made to the invisible jet from Wonder Woman. Isn't that great? And it just, there's not much of a connection that it makes. It's not. It's throwing a lot of hits, but it's landing surprisingly few of them, and none of them are particularly enough to elicit laughter. I want to say it's not. It's not absolutely terrible. I'm actually kind of between poor and neutral, but just I don't know. I'm gonna say it's neutral. I felt nothing. World building is a joke. I'm sorry. Holy no. There's not enough. There's not enough about the universe that's particularly established to even kind of begin world building, and even then, the world building is almost primarily based on the Wish Stone and its origins and where it comes from. But its origins are unknown, and it teleports apparently throughout various societies, and it can lead to ruin. There's a little bit in Diana's backstory given about the land of Themyscira. There's some minor details that are espoused upon about just the general vibe of the 1980s and the concept of Maxwell Lord and his kind of venture capitalist oil tycoonery. But there's not something that is built up particularly great in this one, and there's not there's not a lot of elements that have me saying, oh man, I'd love to venture more into this aspect of life or this aspect or that aspect. Um, so even for a superhero universe that's part of a grander universe, it still doesn't make much of a mark, and it kind of comes off as you want to know less about it. It's yeah. In terms of the plot, and this is when I say plot, I primarily don't mean the quality of the story overall. I use the word story to describe that, and I don't include it on here because I feel like a lot of it's typically um, kept properly rated between the tension, the pace, the consistency, the intellect, and humor. When I'm describing plot, I primarily mean how often elements of the movie relate to each other. It's essentially like how many times you see a good mention of Chekhov's gun, or how much you see foreshadowing, how much you see payoffs, how much you see actual setups, and how many times that some random detail just turns into a loose thread that's never looked back on. It's with Wonder Woman, it's rather neutral. There's a few callbacks that are made in the movie. There's a few connections that are made. Obviously, a lot of it deals with kind of Barbara's relationship with Diane and the evolution of that. Barbara kind of being big on zoology and therefore wanting to become an apex predator. Wonder Woman cheating, and the origin and saying, oh hey, maybe it's not good to cheat at things. Don't lie to yourself. That's the wrong color gray. Something's up with that gray. I don't think that's the correct one. There we go. And then it makes a few callbacks here and there, like Steve Trevor teaching Wonder Woman to fly, but it feels disjointed, and there's a few other parts that still seem to spring up out of nowhere. The Wishstone itself is still kind of a odd plot point that's revisited a lot, but it doesn't do much with it. It doesn't really grow. It doesn't have a cool reference to itself. It doesn't have some interesting bylaw that's used to undo it at the end. It's just everyone undoing it themselves, which seems like an incredibly unbelievable odds of happening. But there's a few things that relate to each other, but it doesn't particularly hit a lot. Convenience, which is a measure of just how much is pulled out of its ass. The most of the movie is pulled out of the ass. Pretty much all of the resolution is pulled out of its ass, as well as a large amount of things that lead into the main conflict is pulled out of its ass. There's a few pieces of setup with it, like Maxwell Lord wishing to be the Wishstone, but other than that, so many problems are created arbitrarily and they're solved arbitrarily. It doesn't feel particularly good. It feels insulting. When you see it come out and you're just thinking, oh, so that's what they were trying to do, huh? Okay. That doesn't mean anything, but I'm okay. It's like there's so many like Wonder Woman with the armor, the fact that Maxwell Lord broadcasts his message using some broadcasting system that he believes is about physically touching everybody, although that's only based on the flimsy word of a person who had the information told to them by another third party and therefore isn't actually aware of it, and is the way his tone is implying it actually carries the fact that it's not how that actually works, and that it needs to work literally like that, not figuratively as the person is describing. So it just kind of comes out a little undeserved, and then the resolution comes out kind of undeserved because it tries to establish the fact that the lasso of truth can't particularly go through strong winds, and then the lasso of truth just goes through strong winds. And there's pieces like that all around. Like, the golden armor can't stand up to Cheetah, then the golden armor just can stand up to Cheetah. Why? Because, well, it needs to be a climax in this movie, and that has happened. Or, Wonder Woman is not willing to give up anything for Steve Trevor, or is willing to give up everything for Steve Trevor, and then she's willing to give up Steve Trevor for everything, because that's just how it is. That's cool. The solution is right there in the script where it says, just do it, not sponsored by Nike. So it's disappointing. And if you have been listening to me kind of go into each facet of this movie, you kind of can guess where the ending is going. The ending is... Actually, no, I'm genuinely trying to think of something good to say about it. It resolves everything, I guess. Though there's still a few questions that are raised, because supposedly a lot of things are undone, but it doesn't look like everything is undone, and there's still the element of, like, characters who would need to renounce wishes, and how exactly that worked across a global area, and there's so many questions that are still there. There's so many questions that still rack my brain that would be a problem come Batman v Superman, and, well, the Justice League after that and everything. And I'm not... I don't know where else it's... trying to think, like, the good parts about the ending were... Maxwell Lord being with his kid, I guess. That's... Yeah, that's about it. Man, that just feels depressing. Like, I feel like there was something that I was trying to like, understand, I was trying to like this movie a lot. I was genuinely thinking, like, alright, cool, it's not going to knock it out of the park, but it's going to be okay, it's going to be wacky fun, but even the wacky antics didn't come out right, and just the characters felt super inconsistent, the ideas were pulled out of nowhere, the weird movements and actions that had to be done in order to just facilitate the plot, which was still loose at best, just to make this story even get from point A's to point B's to point C's just doesn't work at all. And yeah, that like, this is actually why I do these reviews, because it's typically me talking to myself, trying to look at which parts I enjoyed about something and which parts I didn't, and coming to a better conclusion of how much I appreciate what I was watching, instead of just going off the cuff and just talking about something as a whole. Like, if you get to break it down into its consummate parts, you might genuinely see something that you weren't paying attention to before, that you'd be like, oh man, hey, this is actually pretty good that they do in this movie. But Wonder Woman was not that movie for me. This is, or Wonder Woman 1984 was not that movie for me. I should clarify. Wonder Woman was already not that movie for him. For me, just to be abundantly clear. There's already an issue there, but Wonder Woman 84, a movie I was hoping would do better, did worse, essentially. And I'm really not looking forward to whatever the next DC movie is. Oh wait, no, it's the Batman. Which, nah, I'm still not particularly interested in that. Alright, well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day.